Welcome along. Now, before we start, I want to warn you again about some strong language and content here, but it is time to expose everybody who helped cover up the scale of the Pakistani and Muslim child rape gangs right across Britain. Police forces across the country did not investigate because they were too afraid of stoking racial tensions. That was a fact that came out at an inquiry, especially around the Yorkshire area. Keir Starmer was the Director of Public Prosecutions. I think he failed victims. But it isn't just the perfect example, really, of how rotten and widespread this cover-up was. Because have a little look at this clip, and then I'll explain to you what I think is really going on here. So go on.
The statement that you made on the 24th of October, that the CPS had failed grooming victims. That's a very serious statement from the Director of Public Prosecutions. How did you fail the victims of child grooming?
I think that was the headline rather than my words, but the point I was trying to make was this, and it wasn't restricted to the Crown Prosecution Service. It was the police, the Crown Prosecution Service, and to some extent the courts as well.
Well, the man questioning that young Director of Public Prosecutions there is none other than Keith Vaz, a man who resigned in disgrace due to a cocaine and rent boy scandal. He was the moral politician, was he? Put forward on behalf of the state. Then Keir Starmer went on to say that because, unfortunately, there was drink and often drugs involved with the young girls in these grooming rape gang situations, they also repeatedly went back to their attackers. Well, because of the nature of it. But because of those two things, very often, nobody was charged. Well, why did he not do more about it then? Wasn't he in a position to have done more about it? He is now our Prime Minister. Is it in his interest, do you think, to have a full inquiry now? I would say obviously not, especially when you consider things like this.
The first thing I learnt in the criminal law was that it was impossible for a girl under the age of 16 to consent to sexual intercourse in any circumstances. Now, what has happened here repeatedly, we are told, is that police officers were visiting premises where young girls, 12, 13, 14 years old, were found with a number of adult men, whether they were Asian or not, doesn't matter, they were adult men. And the police officers apparently were saying, well, she's consented, that's all right, we'll go away. Does every single officer in the South Yorkshire Police Force now understand that in no circumstances at all can a girl under the age of 16 give consent to sexual intercourse?
So that was at a public meeting, which is really why we decided to blur the faces there, at South Yorkshire Police. You heard that right. Police used to turn up, find young girls naked, drunk and on drugs late at night in a house full of Asian men, and they would arrest the white girls. Seriously, they ignored the age of consent, it seems. They ignored that. So already we have police forces not investigating because they don't want to seem racist. We know that police ignored the law and the age of consent. And the man in charge of prosecutions, who is now the Prime Minister, didn't successfully prosecute, I would argue, that many people. But this contempt for the victims, I'm afraid, gets worse because it involves the media. So Channel 4 have commissioned a 3-part documentary on false grooming allegations in northern towns. Tens of thousands of girls were abused. Schoolgirls were anally gang raped. But Channel 4 wants to talk about an alleged liar. One alleged liar. Oh, yeah, that's the way to do it, is it? The BBC have done a documentary on fake grooming gangs, again called Liar, the fake grooming gang scandal. Do you think now, then, that the legacy media will be calling for a national inquiry into the scale of this problem? I suspect not. This is the same BBC that allowed it to be put out there that the schoolgirls who were drugged, raped and abused were, quote, more sexually experienced than the blokes doing the raping.
As the evidence emerged, the Syrian men in many ways appeared less sexually experienced than the girls they were supposed to have attacked. One of the other defendants revealed to the court he'd never even seen two people kissing.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, it actually makes me so angry listening to that stuff. And now GB News can exclusively reveal that our legal system has also been complicit in keeping these animals in the country. A convicted member of a grooming gang could not be deported to his home country because he claimed that he was now gay and that his previous conviction for running a huge drug empire might have meant that he'd be persecuted back in Iran. He sexually abused a 14-year-old girl and flooded the streets with drugs. But we couldn't deport him in case he suffers in Iran. And we'll add him to the headline I think you just saw a moment ago there about Rochdale. So the Rochdale attackers were set for deportation, but they still live in Britain. Now, again, do you really think that our judges, that smug, smarmy class of legal minds in Britain, actually want a full inquiry into this stuff? Well, I don't think they do. But I'll tell you who I think really doesn't want an inquiry. It is this guy.
Well, look, ethnicity is important and nothing should get in the way of investigating and prosecuting child sexual exploitation. But if you look at the overall figure, that is, a relatively small element of it.
Oh, relatively small, is it? He was desperate to say that ethnicity only has a small part to play. 1 in 73 Pakistani Muslims in Rotherham were prosecuted. 1 in 73. And he won't say there's a racial aspect to it. Look, go on, Keir. Go on. Have an inquiry. I bloody dare you. Let's get the thoughts of my panel this evening now. We have political strategist and former Conservative Special Advisor Lauren McKevitt. We also have the Director, Centre for Migration and Economic Prosperity, Stephen Wolfe, and journalist and broadcaster JJ Anasobi. Stephen, just national inquiry here. I mean, this scale of perceived cover-up, it just seems to me as though no one's particularly desperate to have it, are they?
Well, the establishment isn't. They are not. And they're a disgrace. They should be hanging their heads in shame and using this as an opportunity to get at it straight away. Yes, they say that we've had the Casey report, but I've read it. It has nothing to do with just dealing with the grooming gangs. It tries to be a broader spectrum from things that happened in the Church of England and the Roman Catholic Church. It's an attempt not to identify this specific issue. And it's a way also, by not having an inquiry, of dealing with those people who are culpable. The police officers, the senior individuals within councils, those in politics that ignored it because of racial issues on it. And that's why it's an utter disgrace that they're not having this particular inquiry, and they won't want it because of the embarrassment that it will cause.
Well, what do you think, JJ? Do you think that there is a case to be had there? I mean, I've tried to kind of identify a few different police forces, arguably the judicial system as well, and the person who is literally now in power in this country, Keir Starmer. And I actually don't think it's in any of their interest to have an inquiry, which makes me think that we won't get one.
I think it's in his interest to have an inquiry. I don't like Keir Starmer at all. Despite being a Labour supporter, I think he's lousy. The worst leader we've ever had, I think, and probably one of the worst prime ministers. But he was responsible for overhauling the system so the CPS could prosecute more people from these grooming gangs. He did what he could do to try and get as many prosecutions as possible. I think it's going to make him actually come out well. But let's not forget, this all happened during the Tories, when they were in government. And Kevin Bain not to come out now and say it's a disgrace that Jess Phillips has said no, there shouldn't be an investigation, it should be done independently by the local council. Well, that's what the Tories said for 2 other areas as well. Labour are copying exactly what the previous government did, but Labour are the ones who are now being thrown over the coals for it and saying, no, they're wrong, there should be an inquiry. Well, yeah, cool, and if Elon Musk wants to go on social media and say there should be an inquiry, he's got the billions, he can pay for an independent inquiry to happen himself. Why doesn't he put his money where his mouth is?
I do think that Reform are now saying that they might pay for some kind of independent inquiry. What's your view on this, Lauren, when you see, as I'm sure you're already aware of a lot of that stuff, but you see the way that the police force have gone about it, I mean, ignoring the age of consent on some of these girls as well, turning up to a flat somewhere in South Yorkshire and there being some 13, 14-year-old girls there, obviously in a state of undress, drunk and on drugs, and you arrest them and you don't think, well, hang on a minute, why are there like 10 Asian blokes here? What's going on?
I think it's part of a wider issue that the police in the United Kingdom, in England and Wales in particular, have with women,
right.
And protecting women.
Yeah.
But I also think, as I was in the Wales office when we had the issue show up of the North Wales care homes, the questions about the original Waterhouse inquiry. I worked for the Welsh Secretary of State, who then, with the Justice Secretary, instigated the McCurr review. The reason we did that is because the police forces involved cannot investigate themselves. The councils involved, they cannot investigate themselves. You have to have outside people investigate what has gone wrong at such a systemic failure level. And this is the problem with Reform offering to pay for something. As soon as a political party offers to pay for something, it ceases to be independent.
I get that. I do hear that. However, I would counter that by saying Oldham Council are asking for one.
Yeah.
And the Tories said no, and Labour have said no, and it makes me wonder, Steve, what are people hiding? OK, so Keir Starmer maybe was tripping over himself there initially to appear to not say that there was some kind of cultural issue that might be going on. I think 1 in 73 British Pakistani men in Rotherham being prosecuted would indicate to me that maybe there is some kind of cultural problem.
I think we have a problem in this country with taking something seriously until the general public are disgusted. So the Post Office inquiry didn't really... I mean, it was rumbling for years.
Yeah.
When I started working in Parliament in 2009, Bates's file was on our desk. He was from our patch up in North Wales. You know, and it rumbled and it rumbled and it rumbled, and it's still going on.
I get it.
Part of the problem here is... Let me just finish my point here. Part of the problem here is, until the general public are disgusted by something, politicians
but
don't
now
want to kick into
the dam's
gear.
burst, though, hasn't it?
Yeah,
the dam's burst. I mean, gosh, yesterday when I kind of woke up and was on social media, because we've been talking about stuff for a while. We have been talking about stuff for a while. And fair play to people who come on this channel, because, you know, it's not just, you know, it's not just me or Charlie Peets or whatever. A lot of people are talking about it. Oh, yesterday I was like, what's happening? It's gone fully mainstream. So you look around and you think, well, whose interest is this in now to have a full-blown inquiry? Well, it's not the bloke who was fronting up the DPP, maybe. Not really some of the political figures at the time, not the police forces. So I just don't feel like we're going to get one.
I just look at this and think to myself, which was more important? The abuse of young children by men in this country, and they should be investigated, or a burning tower, or those who are coming across on Windrush, or a post office inquiry, or Hillsborough. As far as I'm concerned, the abuse of little girls should be the most important inquiry this country has ever had.
But then
it trumps any of them.
But then look at rape convictions in this country, less than 1%. We don't do anything near enough to protect victims of rape in this country. If I was Prime Minister, women...
We don't do enough
to protect women. Correct.
And girls in this country.
Anyone who commits sexual assault, for me, they should be chemically castrated. Simple as that. If you come into this country and you commit a sexual assault, get deported. I couldn't give a toss what you say about if I go back to Iran, put them on a plane and send them back.
I would hope that the reason why, if we don't end up having some kind of great big inquiry, I just hope it's not because they're scared of what it'll show. If they're genuinely scared of the fact that it would show that maybe there is a disproportionate number. The problem was even bigger than we thought in Rotherham.
I think that's happening. I think that's one of their concerns, and I do think that they're also more concerned about racial divisions growing if this actually happens. And that's why I'm angry about it, because it shouldn't be about race or creed or division. It should be about identifying that problem and saying there is the issue. Now that we know what this issue is, now that we can see who the individuals are, now we can deal with it.
We also have a government, and it's not just a government of a political party. We have a system of government in the United Kingdom that exists in order to shift blame onto other people. You know, so there's systemic failure in how these girls were treated by the education system, by the health system, by the council system, by the police, by the judicial system. That's at least 5 government departments, all of whom over the course of the last 20 years... letters coming out from government ministers sending to councillors and to police chiefs, all of whom are attempting to say, well, we've done this little bit, it now goes to someone else. You know, we created NHS England in order to not lose a health secretary every 6 months because the NHS was going down the tubes. We created a government system in this country that shifts blame professionally.
And now
this is the big problem.
Can hear practically the sound of documents being shredded right across the country. I can hear the sound of emails being deleted and people saying, I never knew that person. Because this is it, when you express it exactly like I think you guys have done so far tonight, which is just the amount of... If this is a national issue that's taking place in every single town and city, which I suspect it is, then that implies that every single town and city has got people who are responsible. And those people, by definition, would have been in positions of political power and would have been potentially for the last 20 years. And realistically, it's going to be very difficult, I think, for us to now get a proper inquiry into all of that. But we will have to wait and see. Guys, thank you very much. I know, again, not a particularly easy topic to talk about, but I think it's important nonetheless. Home Office spokesman has said this: no child should ever suffer sexual abuse or exploitation. Everyone who's responsible for children's welfare must learn from past mistakes and everything possible to prevent future failings. Just in terms of Oldham as well, one of the councillors there, Arooj Shah, is the leader of the council, said since October the government confirmed that we should carry out a local inquiry. We've been working on setting up that independent inquiry, and that work has included liaising with Oldham survivors as well as Telford and people in Greater Manchester as well. So they say that they are working closely to try to make sure that something happens.
We need to talk about the former whistleblower at Greater Manchester Police, Maggie Oliver, who's accused Sir Keir Starmer of being as guilty as anyone over failures to tackle grooming gangs.
Yes, that's as pressure mounts on the government to deliver a public inquiry into the grooming gang scandal across the UK.
Well, the world's richest man, Elon Musk, has been widely outspoken on the issue after claiming safeguarding Minister Jess Phillips, who seems to be sort of blocking this government-led national inquiry, deserves to be in prison.
Let's get more now with the former Metropolitan Police Detective Peter Bleksley. Peter, what do you make of all this? Is this worth a public inquiry or, as Jess Phillips has said, she'll leave it to a local sort of inquiry?
The scale of the raping of children by these gangs is so wide and has gone on for so long and was allowed to happen because of various agencies not doing their job properly. It is such a serious matter. So many lives have been destroyed. We must do everything possible to ensure it never happens again. And I therefore think that a wide-reaching public inquiry with all the statutory powers so that it could compel people to give evidence is the very least that the victims deserve.
Is that not what we got in the inquiry which concluded in 2022?
No, we didn't. That was by no means as wide-reaching as it should be. And of course, on that day, we saw when the findings were delivered, we saw the wonderful Maggie Oliver, former Greater Manchester Police detective, who was so enraged and outraged by what she repeatedly saw that the only way she could go public was to leave the police. And she's dedicated her life ever since to helping victims of these appalling types of crimes. We saw Maggie entirely dissatisfied. We saw the Chief Constable that day issuing platitudes and promises, and guess what's happened? No one's been held to account. There appears to be very little wholesale change and improvement, and these cases just keep coming.
All right, spell it out for us in your view. Why is this? Why is nothing happening any further? Whose interests are being guarded here?
I believe that in the early days, when these allegations were being made by young girls who, yes, were vulnerable, who were being groomed, exploited, they've been plied with alcohol and drugs, and then subjected to the most horrific gang raping by gangs of men, brown-faced, majority of Pakistani origin, Muslim men who treated these young white girls as trash that they could deal with, they could treat however they choose to exploit. When these issues were raised, I remain entirely convinced that many senior police officers were fearful of intervening because they may be branded racist. There was cowardice from the police, there was cowardice from social services, there was potential cowardice from others. It's about time this nation harnessed the bravery of Maggie Oliver and others and got all the truth out there.
I mean, I know it's difficult for the police, but they and politicians and social services and all the key authorities need to be able to see through that, don't they? I mean, have we reached a point where perhaps they are, if this was to happen again, people would see through that and be able to defend the rights of children against fears of being branded racist or Islamophobic?
We must live in hope, but an inquiry that has statutory findings that leads to recommendations that must be taken on board would go some way to satisfying me. But of course, will that bring us accountability? It is utterly scandalous to hear what these people did to these children as they raped them. There are many people out there now that are following these cases, making the findings of some of these cases, judges' comments, putting them out there into the public domain. And should anybody do their research online and find the recent sentencing comments from a judge, it is absolutely breathtaking and beyond rage as to what these men did to these young girls, how it was ever allowed to occur in this country, is a huge dark stain upon our nation.
Peter, we've got to leave it there, but good to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed.
And we also need to give you the Home Office's official response. They say no child should ever suffer sexual abuse or exploitation. Everyone who is responsible for children's welfare must learn from past mistakes and do everything possible to prevent future failures.
David's been in touch, said Maggie Oliver should get an honour. And she really should.
Yeah.
She really should, but nothing so far.